racist slur sparks chaos in a supermarket, but the victim reveals he's the CEO. Will justice prevail? Like and subscribe to catch this gripping tale of redemption and our latest videos. The supermarket thrummed with raw chaos, carts collided. A toddler's wail cut through the clamor, and cash registers chirped like a swarm of mechanical insects. James Carter, clad in a sleek black suit, sliced through the crowded aisles, his phone vibrating with urgent boardroom alerts as he zeroed in on the cafe's espresso station. A sudden, venomous shout detonated. "Go back where you came from, Margaret Klein." An elderly white woman, spiked white hair in a glare sharp enough to carve stone, jabbed a trembling finger at James, her cart piled with discount meat and soda cans. The crowd froze. Shoppers clutched bags. A glass bottle of sauce slipped from a woman's grip, exploding across the floor in a red smear. James's heart slammed against his ribs, but his face was a fortress, eyes unyielding. Whispers turned to jeers. A bearded man in a leather jacket smirked, nodding at Margaret's venom. "You heard me," she snarled, stepping closer, her voice a jagged blade slicing the air. James met her stare, unflinching, then spun on his heel, striding toward a door marked "Employees Only" with a predator's calm. Margaret's laugh was a hyena's cackle. "Crawl back home," she taunted, as a cluster of shoppers clapped, their prejudice laid bare. A teenage girl in a hoodie hesitated, her phone half raised, torn between filming and fleeing. The door slammed shut, and the store's pulse flickered back. Carts creaked. A scanner beeped. Then the speakers erupted, a voice like a thunderclap. "This is James Carter, CEO of Market One. All shoppers, front of the store, immediately." Gasps ricocheted through the aisles. Margaret's sneer crumbled, her face blanching as if drained of blood. Shoppers abandoned their carts, surging forward, phones flashing like a paparazzi swarm. A young cashier, acne-scarred and wide-eyed, vaulted over her counter, nearly toppling a stack of canned beans to join the rush. James didn't reappear through the staff door. Instead, he stormed in from a hidden side entrance, flanked by two security guards in black, their earpieces glinting. The crowd, now 200 strong, buzzed with electric shock. A makeshift stage of crates and a podium awaited, rigged by a manager who sensed history unfolding. James ascended, his suit absorbing the harsh fluorescent light, his presence a magnet pulling every eye. Margaret elbowed to the front, her voice a banshee's shriek. "You're no CEO, this is a scam." A knot of her supporters jeered, waving fists. But James raised a hand, and the noise died like a switch flipped off. 20 years ago, he began, his voice a molten forge of rage and resolve. "I was scraping moldy bread from this store's dumpster, dodging kicks from security, swallowing slurs worse than hers." The crowd stilled, phones wavering. "I was less than nothing to people like you," he said, his gaze boring into Margaret, who gripped her cart, veins bulging, spat on, beaten, told I'd die on those streets. But I fought, stole textbooks, studied by streetlights, worked till my hands bled. I built Market One, every store, every shelf, from my own scars." A woman in a nurse's scrubs sobbed, clutching her purse. The cashier, filming, whispered, "This is insane." Margaret's voice cracked like dry wood. "You're a liar. This country's not yours." Her words ignited a few shouts of support, but the crowd's tide was shifting. Boos rained on her, loud and merciless. James leaned forward, his voice a low, lethal growl. "You don't know what I've survived, ma'am, but you're about to." Before she could spit another word, the store's glass doors exploded inward, shards glittering as 10 FBI agents in tactical vests charged through, their boots pounding like war drums. Margaret Klein froze. The lead agent's voice was a gunshot, his badge flashing under the lights. Margaret screamed, her cart crashing over, cans and meat packs spilling like shrapnel. The crowd detonated screams, shoves. A man tripping over a stroller, his coffee splashing. Agents swarmed Margaret, pinning her arms as she flailed, her curses raw and desperate. I didn't do anything, she howled, but steel cuffs snapped shut, her wrists twisting. The crowd parted, some cheering, others cowering, phones capturing every chaotic second. James stood unmoved, his eyes cold fire as the agents dragged Margaret toward the exit, her shoes scraping, her screams echoing. The cashier's hands shook, her live stream spiking with comments. A child wailed, clinging to his mother, who stared at James, awestruck. James raised his hand again, his voice ablaze through the storm. This isn't just about her. It's about what we let grow in the dark. The crowd hushed, hanging on his words. I was homeless. Yes, a kid with nothing but hunger and dreams. But I'm not the only one with fire inside. A man in a construction vest clapped, then a woman with a cane, the sound swelling into a roar. Margaret, halfway to the doors, twisted back, shrieking, "You'll burn for this." James didn't blink, his focus locked on the crowd. Market One isn't just a business, he said, his voice rising. It's a promise no one gets crushed, no one gets erased. Not me, not you, not ever. The applause was a tidal wave, shaking the store's very walls. An elderly man in a fedora wiped his tears, nodding. The cashier, still filming, gasped, "This is bigger than viral." James stepped down, his eyes sweeping the crowd, guilt in some, hope in others. All was transfixed. Outside, FBI vans screeched, Margaret's screams swallowed by sirens. But James's war was far from over. He signaled his security, a subtle nod, as if unleashing a plan too vast for the moment. The crowd sensed it, their cheers louder, phones still rolling. History carved in real time. The supermarket's air crackled with tension as James Carter stood on the crate platform, his words still ringing in the ears of the 200-strong crowd shoppers, cashiers, and security guards, all riveted, their phones capturing every second of the chaos that had just unfolded. Margaret Klein's screams faded as FBI vans peeled out, sirens wailing into the distance. But the store was far from calm. Cans and shattered glass littered the floor where Margaret's cart had crashed, and the crowd buzzed with whispers, some in awe, others in disbelief. James's security team flanked him, their eyes scanning for trouble, while the teenage cashier, still filming, zoomed in on his face, her live stream comments exploding. A woman in a nurse's scrubs clutched her phone, tears streaking her cheeks, as a man in a construction vest shouted, "Keep going." "Man," James raised a hand, not for silence at this time, but to pull the crowd deeper into his story. "You think that was the worst I've faced," he said, his voice a blade of grit and fire, cutting through the murmurs. "Let me take you back to when I was less than the dirt under her shoes." The crowd leaned in, phones dipping slightly, as if the weight of his words demanded their full focus. Margaret's jeering allies, now scattered in the back, shifted uncomfortably, their bravado crumbling. James stepped forward, his suit catching the fluorescent glare, his eyes burning with a truth no one could deny. "I was 16, sleeping in an alley behind this very store, wrapped in a tarp that smelled like motor oil. Rats were my neighbors. Hunger was my clock. I'd wait till midnight, when the dumpsters got tossed moldy bread, bruised apples, anything I could choke down. But it wasn't the hunger that broke me. It was the eyes, people like her, walking past, spitting, telling me I was a stain on their world." A gasp rippled through the crowd. The cashier's hands shook, her phone wobbling. A young man in a hoodie lowered his jaw tight, as if seeing himself in James's words. James's voice dropped, raw and unrelenting. "One night, a security guard caught me digging in that dumpster. Didn't ask questions, just swung his baton. Cracked my ribs. Left me bleeding in the snow. Said, 'Stay gone, or next time you're dead.' I was a kid, but to him, I was nothing. The crowd was silent now, save for a soft schwa from a grandmother in a scarf. James paced the platform, his movements sharp, like a fighter recounting a war. I didn't stay gone. I couldn't. I stole a library card, yeah. Stole it, snuck into night classes, hid in the back, learned math, business. Anything I could. Worked days hauling crates, nights scrubbing floors, saving every cent. Got my GED, then a degree, all while dodging cops and slurs. Every step. Someone told me I'd fail, that I didn't belong. But I kept building, first a corner store, then 2, then 10. That's Market 1. That's me. The crowd erupted. Applause thundering. Phones thrust high again. The nurse shouted, "You're a king," and others joined, their cheers shaking the aisles. The cashier, grinning, muttered, "This is legend shit." But the moment splintered as a man in a flannel shirt, one of Margaret's earlier supporters, shoved through the crowd, his face red with rage. "You're full of it," he bellowed, spit flying. "You didn't build nothing. This is a PR stunt." A few others nodded, emboldened, their murmurs rising. James's security stepped closer, but he waved them off, his eyes locking on the man. "You want proof," James said, his voice dangerously calm. He pulled out his phone, tapped it, and the store's overhead screens, usually flashing ads for cereal, lit up with a video. It was grainy, old security footage, a scrawny teenage James, shivering, pulling bread from a dumpster, then flinching as a guard's baton swung. The crowd gasped, some covering their mouths. The flannel shirt man froze, his bluster gone. James let the video loop, his voice rising. "That's me. That's where I started. You think I'm here for clout? I'm here because I served." The crowd roared again, louder, drowning out the last of the hecklers. The flannel shirt man slunk back, head down, as a woman in a red coat yelled, "Shame on you," at him. James didn't pause, his story charging forward. Market 1 isn't just my win. It's for every kid in an alley, every person told they're less. I hired people like me, people you wouldn't look at twice, gave them bonds, homes, hope. That's why I'm here today, not for her hate, but for you. The crowd was electric now, clapping, stomping, a few chanting, "Market 1, Market 1." The grandmother hugged her grandson, tears streaming, as the young man in the hoodie punched the air. But trouble wasn't done. A woman in a yellow jacket, another of Margaret's allies, pushed forward, her voice shrill. "You're stirring up trouble," she screamed, pointing at James. "Oh, you'll ruin this store." She lunged toward the platform, grabbing a crate, trying to yank it down. Security moved fast, but James was faster, leaping off the crates and landing inches from her, his presence a wall. "Ruin it," he said, his voice low, lethal. "I am this store. You want to tear it down? Start with me." The woman froze, her hands trembling, then backed away, the crowd booing her into retreat. James climbed back up, his eyes sweeping the sea of faces, some alight with hope, others wrestling with guilt. "I'm not done," he said, his voice a promise. "This isn't just my story. It's ours, and we're not stopping here." The applause was deafening, a tidal wave of sound, as the cashier's live stream hit thousands of viewers. Outside, police lights flashed, a reminder of Margaret's fate. But inside, James's words were the real storm, reshaping everything. He nodded to his team, a signal something bigger was brewing, as the crowd chanted his name, ready for whatever came next. The supermarket vibrated with raw energy as James Carter's words, sharp, unyielding, hung in the air. The crowd of 200 still reeling from his story of survival and defiance. Applause thundered, shaking the aisles, phones flashing like a lightning storm. The teenage cashier's live stream spiking with thousands of viewers chanting, "Market 1" in the comments. Shattered glass and scattered cans marked the spot where Margaret Klein's cart had fallen, a grim reminder of her venom. But the chaos was far from over. James stood on the crate platform, his black suit a stark contrast to the fluorescent glare. His security team poised like hawks, eyes darting across the sea of faces, some radiant with hope, others shadowed by shame. The woman in the yellow jacket, humiliated after her failed attempt to disrupt, slunk to the back, her allies silent, their bravado crushed. The grandmother in the scarf clutched her grandson, tears glistening, while the man in the construction vest pumped his fist, shouting, "You tell him." Carter James's gaze swept the crowd, his voice ready to surge again, when the store's glass doors exploded inward, a deafening crash of splintering shards scattering across the tiles. 10 FBI agents in tactical vests stormed through, their boots pounding like artillery. Submachine guns slung low, badges glinting under the lights. Margaret Klein. On the ground, the lead agent roared, his voice a cannon blast, cutting through the crowd's gasps. Pandemonium erupted, shoppers screamed, shoving each other. A cart toppled, spilling oranges that rolled like loose grenades. The cashier ducked behind her register, still filming, her phone shaking as she whispered, "Oh my God, oh my God." James froze on the platform, his eyes narrowing, his body taut as the agents charged toward the back, where Margaret had been dragged minutes earlier by store security after her outburst. The crowd parted like a tidal wave, phones thrust high, capturing the chaos. A woman in a red coat screamed, clutching her purse, while a man in a hoodie yanked a child out of the agent's path. Margaret, already cuffed and held near the employee exit, shrieked as the agents reached her, her spiked white hair wild, her face a mask of rage and fear. "I'm innocent," she howled, thrashing against the cuffs, kicking at an agent who sidestepped her flailing legs. "This is his fault," she spat, her eyes locking on James, venom dripping from every word. The lead agent, a grizzled man with a scar across his jaw, yanked her upright, his voice ice cold. "Margaret Klein, you're under arrest for fraud, theft, and evading federal custody. 10 years on the run ends now." The crowd gasped, whispers erupting. 10 years. She's a fugitive. The cashier's live stream comments exploded with shocked emojis. Margaret's screams grew feral as the agents hauled her toward the shattered doors, her shoes scraping the floor, leaving streaks of dirt. James raised a hand, his voice slicing through the madness like a blade. "Let them work," he said, calm but commanding, and the crowd stilled, their eyes flicking between him and the unfolding arrest. A young woman in a hijab, tears streaming, clutched her phone, whispering, "Justice." But the chaos wasn't done. A man in a leather jacket, one of Margaret's earlier supporters, lunged from the crowd, shouting, "You set her up!" He swung a fist at an agent who dodged and tackled him to the ground, cuffs snapping shut in seconds. The crowd surged back, screams rising, as another agent radioed for backup, the crackle of static adding to the din. James stepped forward, his presence a lighthouse in the storm. "Enough," he roared, and the crowd hushed, even the agents pausing, their eyes on him. "This isn't about revenge," he said, his voice steady but burning. "This is about truth. She ran from her crimes, but no one runs forever." The lead agent nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes, before barking orders to his team. Margaret, now at the doors, twisted back, her voice a guttural scream. "You'll pay. Carter, you'll all pay." The agents shoved her into a van, its doors slamming shut, sirens screaming as it sped off. The crowd was a live wire, some cheering, others frozen, phones still rolling. The cashier, back on her feet, zoomed in on James, her voice a whisper. "This is unreal." James climbed back onto the platform, his eyes sweeping the chaos, broken glass, toppled carts, the crowd's raw emotion. "What you saw today," he said, his voice rising, "is what happens when hate festers. But it's not the end. It's the start." The crowd leaned in, hanging on his words. I didn't build Market One to watch people tear each other down. I built it to lift us up, every one of us. A man in a trucker hat clapped, then another, the sound swelling into a roar. The woman in the red coat shouted, "You're the real deal." The grandmother hugged her grandson tighter, sobbing openly. James's voice grew fiercer. "This store, this chain, it's for the people who've been kicked, spit on, told they're nothing. We don't just sell groceries, we sell hope." The applause was seismic, shaking the walls, as the cashier's live stream hit tens of thousands of viewers. Outside, police cars formed a perimeter, their lights flashing. But inside, James was the center of gravity. A young man in a hoodie stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I was homeless too," he said loud enough for all to hear. "You're why I didn't give up." The crowd cheered, some reaching out to pat his shoulder. James nodded, his eyes softening for the first time. "Then you're why I'm here," he said, and the crowd roared again, their unity palpable. The agents were gone. Margaret's fate sealed, but James's fight was far from over. He signaled his security, a sharp gesture, as if unleashing a plan too big for the moment. The crowd sensed it, their cheers louder, phones capturing every second, as James stood tall, ready to reshape the world. The supermarket pulsed with a restless energy, the air thick with the aftershocks of the FBI raid that had dragged Margaret Klein away in cuffs, her screams still echoing in the minds of the 200-strong crowd. James Carter stood tall on the crate platform, his black suit sharp against the fluorescent lights, his words about hope and resilience igniting cheers that rattled the aisles. Phones flashed, capturing every moment. The teenage cashier's live stream now hitting tens of thousands of viewers, comments flooding with fire emojis and cries of justice. Broken glass crunched underfoot, carts lay abandoned, and the crowd shoppers, workers, strangers stood united, their faces a mix of awe and raw emotion. The grandmother in the scarf wiped tears, her grandson clinging to her, while the man in the construction vest shouted, "Carter, you're the man." James's security team hovered, their eyes scanning for threats. But the chaos seemed to have burned itself out, or so it appeared. James raised a hand, ready to steer the crowd towards his next words, when a new voice cut through the din, shaky but piercing. "Wait!" A young man, no older than 25, pushed through the throng, his face pale, his brown hair disheveled, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and resolve. The crowd parted, murmurs rising, as he stumbled to the front, his hands trembling. "I'm Ethan Klein," he said, his voice cracking but loud enough to silence the room. "Margaret's my mother." Gasps erupted, phones swiveling to capture him, the cashier zooming in, her whisper barely audible, "No freaking way." James's eyes narrowed, his body tensing, but he stayed silent, letting Ethan speak. The crowd leaned in, their cheers replaced by a tense hush. Ethan's voice shook as he faced James, his words spilling out like a confession. "She raised me to hate people like you. Anyone different. Said they didn't belong, that they were stealing what's ours. I believed her for years. She made me think it was truth." The crowd stirred, some booing, others staring, stunned. A woman in a red coat clutched her purse, her face torn between pity and disgust. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he pressed on, his voice growing steadier. "I was a kid, but that's no excuse. I saw what she did today, what she's always done, and I can't stay quiet. She's wrong about you, about everything." The crowd's boos softened, a few clapping tentatively, as Ethan turned to them. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "To you, Mr. Carter. To everyone here. I was part of her poison, but I'm done." The silence was electric, the crowd hanging on James's response. James stepped down from the platform, his movements deliberate, his eyes locked on Ethan. The security team tensed, ready to act, but James waved them back, stopping inches from the young man. "You're her son," James said, his voice low, a mix of steel and curiosity. Why speak now? Ethan swallowed, and Tawon, his hands clenching. Because I saw you fight, he said, not with fists, but with truth. You didn't let her break you. I want to be that strong. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others wiping tears. The young man in the hoodie, who'd shared his own homeless past, shouted, give him a chance. James studied Ethan, his face unreadable, then extended a hand. Get up here, he said, gesturing to the platform. Ethan hesitated, then climbed up, the crowd erupting in applause, phones flashing anew. The cashier's live stream comments exploded. What a redemption arc. James stood beside Ethan, his voice rising. This is what Market One's about, not just surviving, but changing. This man's here, owning his past. That's harder than fighting. The crowd roared, the grandmother sobbing openly, the construction vest man pumping his fist. But the moment fractured as a woman in a yellow jacket, one of Margaret's lingering allies, shoved forward. Her face twisted with rage. He's lying, she screamed, pointing at Ethan. He's just saving his own skin. She lunged, grabbing a bottle from a nearby shelf, hurling it toward the platform. The crowd screamed, ducking. As the bottle shattered against a crate, glass spraying, security tackled her, pinning her arms. But she kept screaming. They're both frauds. The crowd booed, drowning her out. As security dragged her toward the exit, her curses fading. James raised a hand, his voice a beacon through the chaos. Let her go, he said, and the crowd hushed, stunned. She's angry. Lost. We don't fight hate with hate. The security team hesitated, then released the woman, who stumbled back, silenced by the crowd's glares. James turned to Ethan, his voice firm. You are not your mother. Prove it. Ethan nodded, tears streaming, and faced the crowd. I'll help fix this, he said, whatever it takes. The applause was deafening, shaking the store, as the cashier's phone shook with the intensity. James clapped Ethan's shoulder. A silent pact formed, but his eyes scanned the crowd, sensing the weight of what was coming. Outside, police lights still flashed, a reminder of Margaret's downfall. But inside, a new alliance was born. James signaled his team, a sharp nod, as the crowd chanted Market One, their unity a force ready for the next storm. The supermarket's air was electric. The echoes of Ethan Klein's confession and James Carter's call for unity still reverberating through the 200-strong crowd. Their cheers a tidal wave that shook the aisles. Phones flashed. The teenage cashier's live stream, now a global phenomenon, hitting hundreds of thousands of viewers. Comments blazing with Market One in redemption, broken glass and toppled carts littered the floor. Scars of the FBI raid that had hauled Margaret Klein away. But the crowd shoppers, workers, strangers stood as one, their faces alight with hope. James stood on the crate platform, his black suit a beacon, Ethan at his side, their alliance a spark in the chaos. The grandmother in the scarf sobbed, hugging her grandson, while the man in the construction vest roared, "You're changing the game. Carter outside." Police lights pulsed, a fading reminder of Margaret's downfall. But inside, a new storm was brewing. The cashier's phone pinged with notifications, clips of James's speech, Ethan's apology, and the FBI raid had gone viral, flooding social media with millions of views, hashtags erased by raw emotion. News vans screeched into the parking lot, reporters spilling out, cameras rolling, as the crowd buzzed with whispers of CNN and BBC. James's security team tightened their circle, earpieces crackling, but he waved them back, his eyes scanning the crowd, sensing the weight of the world watching. A store manager, sweat beading on his brow, rushed to James, whispering, "The press wants a statement now." James nodded, his voice low. "Bring 'em in." The crowd parted as reporters surged through the shattered doors, microphones thrusting forward, questions flying like bullets. "Mr. Carter, is this a PR stunt? Did you know Klein was a fugitive? James raised a hand, his presence silencing the chaos. We're doing this my way, he said, and gestured to the platform. The crowd roared, phones capturing every second. As James and Ethan faced the media storm, the supermarket transformed into a makeshift press conference. Reporters jostling, the cashier filming from a shelf she'd climbed for a better angle. James stepped forward, his voice a forge of steel and fire. What happened here wasn't planned. He began, eyes locking on the cameras. A woman attacked me, attacked who I am. I answered with my truth. I built Market One from nothing, from alleys and hate. Today, her son chose truth too. He nodded to Ethan, who stood straighter, tears dried, resolve hardening. The crowd clapped, the grandmother shouting, "Tell it!" But the questions turned sharp. A reporter in a slick suit, his smirk cutting, pushed forward. "Carter, your employees are talking. Some say you're unfit to lead, that this is all for show. What's your response?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, heads turning, as a few store workers in Market One aprons shifted uncomfortably, their whispers caught by nearby phones. James's jaw tightened, but his eyes burned with defiance. "Unfit," he said, his voice a low growl. "I've carried this company through recessions, lawsuits, and doubters like you. My people, my real people, know who I am." He gestured to the crowd, to the workers who cheered him, and they roared back, drowning the reporter's smirk. The cashier's live stream comments surged, "He's the boss." But the reporter wasn't done, his voice rising. "Your stock's tanking. Carter investors say you're divisive. You're risking Market One for personal glory." The crowd tensed, some booing, others glancing at their phones, where news alerts flashed falling stock prices. Ethan stepped forward, his voice unsteady but fierce. "He's not divisive, he's uniting us. I was raised to hate, but he showed me better." The crowd cheered, the young man in the hoodie shouting, "That's right." James seized the moment, his voice rising like a tidal wave. "Market One isn't just a store, it's a mission. We don't just hire workers, we build futures. Starting today, we're launching free training programs for anyone who's been kicked down homeless, discriminated, forgotten." The crowd erupted, applause shaking the walls. As reporters scribbled furiously, the grandmother hugged her grandson, whispering, "That's hope." But the slick reporter pushed again, his voice venomous. "You're dodging the question. Your board's meeting to oust you, sources confirm it." The crowd gasped, the air crackling with tension, as a few workers exchanged worried glances. James stepped closer to the reporter, his presence a wall, his voice lethal. "Let them try. I didn't build this from my blood to let suits tear it down. You want sources, I'm the source." He turned to the crowd, his voice a rallying cry. "This is our fight, every one of you who's been told you're less. Are you with me?" The crowd exploded, chanting, "Carter, Carter," phones thrust high, the cashier nearly falling from her perch, her live stream hitting 1 million views. The reporter shrank back, his microphone dropping, as his colleagues pivoted, shouting new questions. "What's the training program? How will you fund it?" James raised a hand, his voice steady. "We fund it with every dollar Market One earns, every heart we change. This isn't about me, it's about us." The applause was seismic, the grandmother sobbing, the construction vest man stomping his boots. Ethan clapped James's shoulder, their bond sealed, as the crowd's unity drowned out the doubters. Outside, more news vans arrived, their lights flashing, but inside, James had turned the tide, his plan unfolding, the world watching. He signaled his security, a sharp gesture, as the chants grew louder, ready for the next battle. The supermarket thrummed with a feverish pulse. James Carter's rallying cry for unity and his bold training program announcement still igniting the 200-strong crowd. Their chants of "Carter, Carter" shaking the aisles like an earthquake. Phones blazed, capturing every second. The teenage cashier's live stream, now a global firestorm, Millions watching. Comments flooding with Market One and Hope News cameras crowded the shattered entrance. Reporters shouting questions, their lights glaring, while broken glass and spilled groceries marked the chaos of Margaret Klein's arrest. James stood on the crate platform, his black suit a symbol of defiance. Ethan Klein at his side, their alliance a beacon in the storm. The grandmother in the scarf clapped through tears, her grandson cheering, while the man in the construction vest roared, "You're unstoppable." Carter outside. News vans multiplied, their satellites piercing the sky. But inside, James was the center of gravity, his security team scanning the crowd, earpieces buzzing with the updates. The slick reporter, humiliated by James's rebuttal, slunk to the back, his colleagues now scrambling to cover the story of a lifetime. James raised a hand, his voice a forge of resolve, ready to push forward, when a store manager rushed up, his face pale, clutching a folded letter. This came from the jail, he whispered, handing it to James. The crowd hushed, sensing a shift, phones swiveling as James glanced at the envelope, marked with Margaret Klein's name. Murmurs rippled, reporters leaned in, the cashier zooming her live stream, whispering. "What's that?" James's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with conflict. But he tucked the letter into his pocket, his voice steady. "We're not here to dwell on hate," he said, facing the crowd. "We're here to build." The crowd cheered, but the letter's weight lingered in his stance. He stepped forward, his voice rising like a tidal wave. "Today, I'm announcing the Second Chance Center, a place for anyone who's been spit on, pushed down, told they're nothing, training, jobs. Hope that's what we're giving." The crowd erupted, applause deafening, the grandmother sobbing, the young man in the hoodie shouting, "That's my future," reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashing, as the cashier's live stream comments exploded. Game changer James gestured to Ethan, his voice firm. "This man's joining us, turning his past into purpose." Ethan nodded, his eyes fierce, and raised a fist, the crowd roaring louder, chanting "Second Chance." The woman in the red coat hugged a stranger, tears streaming, as the construction vest man stomped his boots. But the moment cracked as James's phone buzzed, a sharp, urgent tone cutting through the noise. He glanced at it, his face hardening, and signaled his security lead, who leaned in, whispering, "Board member threatening to pull funding if you don't step down." The crowd didn't hear, but the tension in James's eyes was a spark in the powder keg. He pocketed the phone, his voice a low growl. "Some people want to stop us," he said, addressing the crowd, his words deliberate. "They think this is too much, too fast. But I don't bend." The crowd roared, sensing a fight, phones capturing his defiance. Reporters shouted, "Who's threatening you?" Carter but James ignored them, his gaze locked on the crowd. The Second Chance Center starts now, groundbreaks next month, funded by every Market One store. The applause was seismic, shaking the walls, but the letter in his pocket burned, Margaret's shadow lingering. A security guard approached, his voice low. "Her lawyer dropped this off, says she wants forgiveness." James's eyes darkened, his fist clenching, but he nodded, taking the letter out, scanning it. The crowd watched, breathless, as he read Margaret's scrawled words, regret, excuses, a plea for mercy. His face was a mask, but his voice, when he spoke, was raw. "She says she's sorry," he said, holding up the letter, the crowd gasping. "But sorry doesn't erase pain. It's what you do next that matters." He tore the letter in half, dropping it to the floor, and the crowd exploded, chanting. Carter Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. "I'll prove it for her," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I'm in Second Chance. All the way." The crowd cheered, the cashier's phone shaking, her live stream hitting new peaks. But the threat from the board loomed, and James's security lead whispered again, "They're meeting now, emergency vote to oust you." James's eyes blazed, his voice a rallying cry. "Let them vote," he roared, facing the crowd. This isn't their company, it's ours. Who's with me? The crowd surged, chanting, Market One phones thrust high, the grandmother raising her cane, the construction vest man shouting, We gotcha. Reporters scrambled, shouting, What's the board doing? Carter but James turned to Ethan, his voice low. You ready to fight for this? Ethan nodded, his jaw set, till the end. The crowd sensed the stakes, their cheers a war cry. As a new figure pushed through a woman in a Market One apron, her face first, I'm a cashier, she shouted. Climbing a crate, Carter gave me a job when no one else would. I'm in, the crowd roared. More workers joining, raising fists. Their unity a fortress. James clapped Ethan's shoulder, his eyes scanning the chaos reporters, phones, the torn letter at his feet. The board's threat was a storm cloud, but he was the lightning. He signaled his security, a sharp gesture, as the crowd's chants grew louder, ready for the fight of their lives. The supermarket crackled with a volatile energy. James Carter's announcement of the Second Chance Center and his defiance against the board's threats fueling the 200-strong crowd. Their chants of Market One, a relentless pulse that shook the aisles. Phones blazed, the teenage cashier's live stream, now a global inferno. Millions watching. Comments surging with Carter and Second Chance news cameras swarmed the shattered entrance. Reporters shouting over each other, while broken glass and spilled groceries bore witness to the chaos of Margaret Klein's arrest and Ethan Klein's redemption. James stood on the crate platform, his black suit a symbol of unyielding resolve. Ethan at his side, their alliance a spark in the storm. The grandmother in the scarf raised her cane, cheering, while the man in the construction vest roared, You're our guy, Carter, and outside. News vans clogged the parking lot, but a new threat loomed, angry shouts and picket signs bobbing beyond the police line. A group of protesters, 24 strong, waved banners reading Carter's a fraud and Market One's a sham, their voices piercing the supermarket's walls. The crowd inside stirred, murmurs rising, as phones swiveled to capture the commotion. James's security lead leaned in, his voice urgent. Their locals say you're using the incident for PR. Cops can't hold them back long. James's eyes narrowed, his jaw set, but his voice was calm, lethal. Let's talk to him. The crowd gasped, reporters scrambling, as James stepped off the platform, gesturing for Ethan to follow. The cashier climbed higher on her shelf, filming, whispering, This is nuts. James strode toward the entrance, security flanking him, the crowd parting like a sea, their cheers mixing with nervous whispers. Outside, the protesters surged against the police line, their leader, a burly man in a denim jacket, shouting, Carter's a liar. He's selling you fake hope. The crowd inside bristled, the young man in the hoodie yelling, Shut up! But James raised a hand, his voice booming. Bring him in. The cops hesitated, then let the leader through, the crowd tensing as he stormed inside, his sign raised like a weapon. Reporters swarmed, cameras rolling. As the man faced James, his face red with rage. You're no hero, he spat. This is a stunt to save your failing company. The crowd booed, but James stepped closer, his presence a wall. You think I'm faking this, he said, his voice a low growl. I bled for this store, for these people. Say your piece, but say it to my face. The man faltered, his sign drooping, as the crowd leaned in, phones capturing every word. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. I thought like you once hated what I didn't understand. Carter showed me I was wrong, Iram. The crowd cheered, the grandmother shouting. Listen to him. The protester's eyes flickered, doubt creeping in, but he doubled down. You're both in on it. Market One's stock is crashing. The crowd gasped, some checking phones where news alerts flashed plunging shares. James's security lead whispered, Boards leaking lies to the press. James's eyes blazed, but his voice was a rallying cry. Stock prices don't build hope, people do. You want truth, join us. He gestured to the platform, and the crowd roared, chanting second min to the chance. The protester hesitated, then dropped his sign, the crowd gasping as he climbed up, facing them. I'm tired of fighting, and he said, his voice breaking. If you're real, Carter, prove it. The applause was deafening. Reporters shouting, "What's next?" Carter, as the other protesters outside lowered their signs, some joining the crowd inside. Ethan seized the moment, climbing a crate, his voice fierce. "I'm starting a community drive, food, clothes, jobs for anyone who needs it. Who's with me?" The crowd surged, workers in Market One aprons raising fists. The woman in the red coat shouting, "I'm in the cashier's live stream, hit new peaks." Comments flooding, "This is unity." But the storm wasn't over. A security guard rushed to James, his face grim, handing him a phone. "It's an exec, says a board member's rallying to fire you," leaking to the protesters. James's fist clenched, his voice a hiss. "They're playing dirty." He faced the crowd, his voice a thunderclap. "Some suits think they can stop us spreading lies, turning neighbor against neighbor. But this is our fight," the crowd roared. The construction vest man shouting, "We're with you." James turned to the protester. "Now on the platform. You want proof? Stick around." The man nodded, tears in his eyes. As the crowd chanted, Carter reporters pushed forward, shouting, "Who's behind the leaks?" But James ignored them, his eyes locked on Ethan. "Keep the drive going," he said, low and fierce. Ethan nodded, rallying the crowd, who began organizing, workers grabbing supplies, shoppers pledging help. The grandmother hugged the protester, whispering, "You're one of us now." But James's security lead whispered again, "Boards voted as tonight, they've got a mole inside." James's eyes burned, his voice a vow. "Then we fight tonight." He signaled his team, a sharp nod. As the crowd's chants grew louder, their unity a weapon. Outside, the remaining protesters joined the crowd, signs abandoned, while inside, James and Ethan stood tall, ready for the boardroom war looming ahead. The supermarket had transformed into a beacon of hope, its aisles now cleared of broken glass and chaos, replaced by banners proclaiming, "Second Chance Center opening today." James Carter stood before a new stage outside, not crates but a polished platform. His black suit crisp under the morning sun, Ethan Klein at his side, their alliance forged in fire. A crowd of 500 former homeless, survivors of discrimination, community supporters gathered, their cheers a symphony of unity, phones flashing, news cameras rolling, the teenage cashier's live stream, now a global monument, millions watching, comments blazing with hope and Carter. The grandmother in the scarf waved a tiny flag, her grandson bouncing, while the man in the construction vest shouted, "You did it." Carter Market, one workers in aprons handed out water, their faces proud, as the woman in the red coat hugged strangers, tears streaming. Reporters swarmed, their questions drowned by the crowd's roar, while police kept a respectful distance, their lights off, the chaos of Margaret Klein's arrest a distant memory. James raised a hand, his voice a forge of grit and triumph. "Today, we open the Second Chance Center for every soul told they're nothing, for every dream crushed by hate." The crowd erupted, banners waving, as Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. "I was part of that hate," he said, "but this place is my redemption." The crowd cheered, the young man in the hoodie, now a volunteer, shouting, "We're all in." James gestured to the gleaming center behind them, classrooms, job training hubs, a haven funded by Market One's heart. But a shadow lingered. His security lead leaned in, whispering, "Board's mole identified. He's here, planning a scene." James's eyes narrowed, his jaw set, as he scanned the crowd, spotting a man in a gray suit, a board member named Hargrove, lurking near the reporters, his phone out, texting furiously. James's voice rose, unwavering. "Some thought we'd fail," he said, eyes locking on Hargrove. "They leaked lies, stirred doubt, tried to break us." The crowd hushed, Sensing a storm, phone swiveling, Hargrove froze, his face paling. As James pointed, "You step up," the crowd gasped, reporters surging as security escorted Hargrove forward, his protest drowned by boos. "I trusted you," James said, his voice a blade. "But you sold us out to tank the center." Hargrove stammered. "It's business," but the crowd roared. Shame. James raised a hand, silencing them. "No hate here. You're out." Hargrove, second chance stands. The crowd exploded, chanting Carter. As security led Hargrove away, reporters shouting, "What's the evidence?" James held up his phone, displaying leaked texts, Hargrove's plot to sabotage funding. The crowd's cheers were seismic, the cashier's live stream spiking, comments flooding justice. But a new figure emerged, halting the celebration. Margaret Klein, released on reduced sentence, stepped from a car, her face gaunt, her spiked hair limp. The crowd stilled, phones capturing her trembling approach. James tensed, Ethan gripping his arm, as Margaret faced them, her voice frail. "I was wrong," she said, tears falling. "I hurt you. Carter, Ethan, everyone. I'm sorry." The crowd murmured, some booing, others silent, as the grandmother clutched her flag. Torn, James stepped down, inches from Margaret, his eyes searching hers. "Words don't fix pain," he said, his voice raw. "Actions do." He gestured to the center. "Help us build." Margaret nodded, sobbing, and Ethan hugged her, the crowd gasping, then clapping. The moment a bridge over hate. The young man in the hoodie shouted, "That's real," as reporters scrambled. Shouting, Margaret's reformed James returned to the stage, his voice a rallying cry. "This center's for all of us, those who fall, those who rise. We're not perfect, but we're together." The crowd roared, banners soaring. As James cut the ribbon, the center's doors opening, volunteers streaming in, former protesters, workers, survivors. Ethan led Margaret inside, her hands shaking but helping. A small step forward. The grandmother hugged the construction vest man, both crying, as the cashier's live stream hit tens of millions. Comments blazing. "This is history." But James's security lead whispered, "Board's vote failed. You're untouchable." James nodded, his eyes sweeping the crowd. Unity, hope, a new dawn. He raised a fist, his voice a vow. "Second chance isn't a building, it's us. Let's keep building." The crowd surged, chanting "Market." One, their voices a tidal wave, phones capturing the triumph. As James and Ethan stood tall, the center alive, the world changed forever. From a hateful slur to a CEO's triumph, James turned pain into purpose, launching Second Chance. Thanks for listening, like, share, and subscribe with notifications on for more thrilling stories of hope and justice.